everyone, today we're going to be doing a short tutorial on making a low poly snow globe scene on Blender. It's been a little while since our last upload, but with the summer coming up, all of us at Reach 5 plan to return to a more regular posting schedule, so definitely stay tuned for that. With that being said, let's get started by deleting our default cube and making our snowman for our snow globe. So we're going to use Shift A to spawn in an icosphere, which will serve as the snowman body. We'll use S to scale this out a little bit, just like that. With Shift D, I'm going to duplicate this sphere and use Z to lock on the Z axis and just place it on top. I'll use S to scale it down to create the middle section. Shift D, Z to create the head here, like that. S to scale down. And now we got the foundation of our snowman. So let's go over to the middle piece. We'll use Tab to enter edit mode, and we're going to try to make the arms. So up here, choose the face select mode, which we're going to use to select one of these triangles. We're going to use I to inset the edges, and then E to extrude out. So this will be our arm, about that much. I'll use S to scale down this end to be more of a point. With Control R, I can create a loop cut just so we can make the hands of our snowman. Just like that. Also, I'm going to introduce another loop cut just in the middle to create like an elbow for our snowman. Use S to scale this loop cut down, and it just creates this bend over here. That being said, let's switch to face select mode and create our hands. So I'll just select one of these faces here, E to extrude out, S to scale in. We'll repeat this 2 more times, E to extrude, S to scale, E to extrude, S to scale. And I'll just use G to grab the faces and just move them around a little bit, just so it doesn't look too regular. G to grab, just like that. So now that's one arm done. Let's repeat this process for the other side. So I'll just grab this face, I to inset, E to extrude out, like that, S to scale in. I'll create 2 loop cuts, one for the hand and one for the middle of the arm. I'll just scale that in a little bit. But now let's create the other hand. So I'll just right click this edge, this face, extrude it out, scale it in. Instead let's extrude this face instead, right at the end. Just like that. Once more, E to extrude, S to scale. Not bad. Let's use G to just grab these, move them around a little bit. Oh, yeah, something like that. Alright, so these arms look about the same length, so that's fine. Now we can get started on our carrot nose. So let's select the head. Let's choose a triangle face that is about halfway down the head. So yeah, this one looks good. Inset with I, E to extrude, S to scale down. That looks pretty good. I'll just add a loop cut in the middle just to give a little bit of shape to this nose, which I'll scale down. Looks good. Now for the eyes, mouth, and buttons, we're going to create one icosphere, which is set with subdivision set to 1, just to create a coal piece effect. We're going to add a material to it to get a gray color, and we're just going to duplicate it across to make our lives a little bit easier. So now that we have our icosphere, let's add a material. Let's set the base color to a dark gray, or a normal gray, whichever. That looks good. Let's scale it down. To add it to our snowman, we're going to enable the snap to feature. Make sure it's set to face and snap width to center. Drag it over like that. That looks fine. I'll use Shift D to duplicate this. Looks good. Let's duplicate this and make the mouth. The mouth will decrease the size of this icosphere just to add some variation in sizes. Move it over here, just duplicate a few times. Just adjust this one, and that looks about good to me. Always move this around later if we need to. Cool. Let's duplicate one of these cold pieces. I'll increase the size a little bit for the buttons. Select a medium size so that the eyes are the biggest. Let's duplicate and duplicate. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight down. Just introduce a little bit of variety if you like. Yeah, just like that. Before we begin with the hat, let's color in the arms to brown, like stick pieces, and the nose. So let's begin with the arms. So let's just select that torso piece, edit mode. Up here on the top, enable the X-ray, just so we can grab these faces. Just make sure the face select is on. I'll just drag, select all of these. Same with those. I'm going to create a new material, and I'll set it to a brownish color. Orange. Move this down. That looks good. We're just going to assign it to these things. If you want to see what colors are being applied, you can go up here and enable this viewport shading mode, so you can just see the colors. And you can see that the torso in the middle was colored brown as well. To avoid this, we're going to color this torso piece white. To do this, press Ctrl I to invert whatever you have selected. So it'll deselect the arms and select the middle portion. We're going to add a new material over here and assign this normal white color to it. Now when I deselect, you can see that the torso is left white and the arms are a brown color. Now let's do this for the carrot nose. So I'll create a new material. First, enter edit mode. Let's just select the nose just like that. Let's create an orange color. That's probably good. Assign it to that. But again, we have the same issue with the entire head being colored orange as well. So let's just invert it with Ctrl I and create a new material. And honestly, here we could just select that old white material we used down the torso up on the head as well. So I'll just assign this material number 6. Great, so now we have our basic snowman. Next, let's begin by crafting the hat. Let's introduce a cylinder shape, like that. Let's drag it up. Let's squish it down, scale Z-axis. Oh, let's first disable the snap to feature up here. Let's try that again. That seems to be a good thickness. Let's see how big it looks. It's a bit too large, so scale it down with S. Like that. That seems to be good to me. Let's enter edit mode. Make sure you have the edge select enabled up here. And we're going to select this entire top ring by using Alt right click. We're going to I, we're going to inset with I, extrude up, and now we have this basic shape of our top hat. Let's blur the top out a little bit by scaling these top edges out with S. Let's extrude up a little bit, scale in, and now we have a beveled top along with the flare up. Now that we have our basic hat, let's add a red stripe across the middle. To do this, we're going to create 2 horizontal loop cuts with Ctrl R, just like that. With your vertex select tool enabled up there, we need to select both of these rings. So with Alt Shift right click, just choose the edge. And as you can see, this entire middle region is selected. We're going to separate this by selection by pressing P and then choose selection. And now this is an entire new object. So if we enter object view and just right click on this middle region, we can move it separately like this. The reason we did this is so that we can introduce a solidify modifier to make this colored band stand out from the rest. So before we do that, we're going to first add our red color to our stripe. I chose red, you can choose anything you like. I'll just make it a little darker. Good. I'll add color to the rest of the hat. A new material. I'll drop the color down to say a gray like this. And now you can see that it looks really flat. So we're going to add the solidify modifier to the stripe, as I mentioned. You can increase the thickness like that. I'll just scale this down a little bit. Oh, never mind, I won't scale it down a little bit. Oh, it's good. Actually, that stands out a bit too much. Drop that back. Just like that. Perfect. So now that we have our hat done, we can begin with our actual snow globe. Set up the base of the snow globe. We're going to add a cylinder. And I'll just set a top-down view just to get an idea of size. I'll probably make it about that large, perhaps. I'll squish this down. I'll scale this with Z. Just like that. I'll enter edit mode. I'll select the top ring of edges with Alt right click. I'll inset with I, extrude up with E. About that much. We're going to create another lip up here, and we're going to do that by pressing E to extrude, but I'm not going to move it anywhere. I'm going to scale this out with S, extrude back up with E, and I'll extrude once more to create a beveled edge similar to how we did with the top hat. So extrude, S to scale it down, and now we have the base of our snow globe. So let's just put this into a side view and let's just line these up with the snowman. Z, let's drag this whole thing up like that. We'll probably move it again later, but just for now. Looks good. To make our glass, we're going to add a UV sphere with this menu. Let's scale it up a little bit. Since it is a full sphere, we need to cut off the bottom half. So we're going to go into edit mode, select the bottom half, delete vertices. Great. Next, we're going to go to the materials tab to make this glass transparent. Let's add a new material, increase the transmission to 1, decrease the roughness to 0, and change the base color to pure white. For some reason, it's not set to pure white. So if it's darker, then in our render, the insides of the snow globe will appear darker than what they should be, really. With that being said, let's go to the modifier tab. Let's first add a subdivision surface modifier, which I will set to 3. This will just fix the jaggedness of this glass sphere. Next, we're going to add a solidify modifier, which we will use to introduce a little bit of thickness to the glass pane. Because as it is before, we added it, it was completely thin. With W, we can also shade the surface smooth. And that concludes the glass piece. So with H, we will just hide that. Next, to make our snow base, which we will sculpt and add our trees and rocks to, we will first add a circle. Scale that up a little bit. We can probably tweak this afterward, its size. What we're going to do first is enter edit mode. And with F, we can fill in the face between these edges. With F, just fill that in. With I, we will inset as far as we can go. It doesn't really matter how precise you are. We did this so we can introduce some loop cuts. So we're going to do this horizontal loop cut and add about 6 of them with the scroll wheel. So that is about 6. That's good. I'll left click and then escape, leave it there. And how we're going to sculpt the snow is we're going to use a proportional editing tool up here. And the idea is if you're in vertex mode, you can select one vertex, and with G, you can move it around. And if you scroll in a little bit, it'll select how many points it's affecting. So with that, just proceed to sculpt the snow. And I'll probably time lapse this because it's very repetitive. Now that we have our snow base done, I just added a few elevations around the outside, probably add a tree here and there and a few big rocks scattered around. But for now, at least, let's start with the tree. So let's add in a cube, which we'll scale down a little bit to get the width of the tree trunk. Let me just drag it outside here. Let's scale it with Z to increase the length of this. About that much, that's good. Let's enter edit mode. Select the vertices up here. We're going to hit E to extrude, which I'll left click to leave it there, and then I'll scale it out with S. Extrude it upward, then scale it in. Wait, I can't see this. Scale it in. If you hit M, you can merge these points into one central point like that. Now also, since this is a winter scene, we should add a layer of snow on top, a thick layer of snow. To do that, let's select all 4 faces on the outside, enable X-ray mode, select these 4 faces, we'll hit Shift D to duplicate, escape to leave it there, we will scale it down, and then drag it up along the Z-axis, and now we have our snow-covered top. Now to make it actually look like a thick layer of snow, we're going to have to separate it similar to how we did earlier. So we're going to hit Key, separate by selection, to make it its own object. So now this is separate like this. Let's add a solidify modifier to this top bit. We'll do something like that. Cool. Now to make it look more like a tree, let's add some color to it. So let's first start with the bottom half of the tree. We'll add a new material and let's add a brown color. So actually first, let's choose the brown color that we made earlier for the arms, this one, and we will assign it to the tree trunk over here. We'll assign it there. And for the rest of the tree, we'll hit Control I to invert. We will add a new material, and we will change this to a green color. Make it a little darker to more of a foresty green, like that. How does it look? Yep, that looks pretty good. And the snow-covered top is white. Perfect. Okay, I think this tree trunk looks a bit too long, so I'll just grab these faces. Wait, grab the bottom face and just grab it and drag it up. Cool. So let's add this to our snow globe. Scale it down, move it around like that. Good. I will duplicate this with Shift D to create another one over here. That looks good. I'll rotate it a little bit so it doesn't look too perfect. Just make sure to grab the snow-covered top when you rotate this tree. Nice. Let's just hope this fits underneath the sphere. So let's spawn that in. Nope, it's too tall. So let's just shrink that. And we can also shrink this. Nice. I think our snowman here looks a little too large, so I'll probably just select everything here and just shrink it down. Like that. That looks much better. Next, let's add some rock. So to do that, we will spawn in an icosphere and make sure the subdivisions are set to 1. Let's drag it up. We'll do something similar to how we did the eyes and the mouth and the buttons. So we're going to modify this and then just duplicate it a couple of times. Let's enter edit mode and manually just move around some of these vertices to get a shape that you would like. I'm trying to get a more flat looking kind of rock that I'll just set along the side. Even something like that is good enough for me. So now that we have our rock, let's add a snow-covered top similar to how we did with the trees. So we're going to select a few faces. But how this technique differs is we're going to extrude these faces up. So we're going to hit E, let's extrude a little bit to get a thin layer. And what we're going to do now is add some color by adding a new material. So I'll just select the rest of the snow faces, add a new material, and this will be our white snow. So I'll just assign it like this. With Control I, invert your selection, add a new material, and set it to a dark gray color, just like with the rock. Now if we see in our material viewing mode, we have our gray rock with the white snow. So let's find a place to set this one down. Oh, it's too far. Let's probably rotate it a little bit, like that. And from this angle here, even something like that's pretty good. Now let's repeat this a couple more times so we can duplicate it with Shift D. And with the edit menu, you can select a few vertices, change up the shape a little bit, make something new. And while I do this, I will probably just time lapse this section. It's a very repetitive process. If you would like more rocks or have some formation or certain organization of them, feel free. But I will be back as soon as I am done adding these rocks. Alright, so I'm back. I've added a few rocks over here. I've added a couple larger ones on the back, on the front, a huge one on the back, and I made these two a little bit smaller because I think I plan to have the camera set around here somewhere looking down like this, so you'll be able to see the variation in shape that way. Now that I look at it, I didn't tilt the hat, which I should fix right now. Just rotate it a little bit on the y-axis, drag it down. Oh, that looks a lot better. I will shift this back a little bit and rotate it a bit more. Perfect. With this done, I will now probably add one more thing, is a small pile of snowballs on the side here, just to add a little bit more stuff to the scene because it's a little bit lacking on the front. So let's add an ecosphere, which we will set the subdivisions to 2, not 1 this time. And this will be very simple. We'll just shrink this down and just duplicate it a bunch to get a small pile going here. Now let's start setting up our scene for rendering. So let's first create a backdrop, which we will rest our base on. Let's create a large plane. And let's go to the side here. Drag this plane down to make it flush with the bottom. About that much should be good. Let's select, go to edit mode, select the back edge, and extrude this one upward. Like that. We'll select this edge over here, hit Control B to create this beveled edge, and just scroll up to round this corner up. Say like that. That should be fine. Let's add a new material over here. And we will, no, not preview. Let's change the base color to a very light blue. I've experimented and I seem to like this one quite a bit. A nice pale blue. Yeah, about that much. A little bit brighter like this. Just like that. Nice. Now let's get started with the lighting. So I'll do Shift A, and spawn in a light area. Let's drag this up here. In the lighting settings, I'll set the power to about 1500, and I will also set the size to 0.125 meters. This one I will leave a little bit higher, and this will serve as kind of a spotlight effect on the scene. If I could move it around like that. Good. I'll duplicate this with Shifty, drag it over, point it like this, and I will change the size to about 0.25. As you increase the size of a light area, that would make the shadows it casts a bit softer. So you would get overall softer lighting with a larger emission area. Before we go any further, let's add some snow to our snow globe. To do this, we're going to grab our glass sphere. Let's just unhide that over here. And let's create a new particle system, which we'll just add one here. Let's increase the number of these particle snowflakes to 4,000. Let's change the Brownian motion to 3.33. And let's also come down here to render and change render as to object. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create a circle and fill it in with edit mode by pressing F, just like that. And we're going to essentially use this circle as the snowflake. Let's rotate this by 90 degrees, like that. And we're going to use this to create our snowflakes. So now that we have this set up here, let's add the object that we set up here. So let's grab this dropper tool, click on the circle, and now it's there. So if you were to press play down here, you'd see these snowflakes fall. And when we render our image at the very end, we would essentially play and then pause at a random point in time, and the snow would be falling. Since we set it to object rotation, let's just get that out of the way right now. As we rotate it, these orient towards the camera. Because I think we're going to have the camera set up somewhere around here. Like this, you can see the base and a shadow that would be cast by these lights. I think we can fine-tune the snowflake position right afterward. First, let's get this camera thing set up. So let's go over to this View tab in the toolbar. If it's closed, you can open it up with N. Let's set the camera to View. So now when we go here to toggle the camera view, as you move your view around, the camera will follow. That's weird. There it is. So we can just orient this around like that. Something like this, and then we can adjust it in a second. You see this thing back here? This odd camera clipping? This can be fixed by going over to the camera settings down here and changing this clipping end to some large number. And just set it to like 500, for example, just so we don't get any of these issues. Just like that. As we wrap up our small scene here, let's change our render engine to cycles for more realistic lighting. Let's change our device to GPU. If the GPU option doesn't come up and you have a GPU, you can come over to Preferences and select it to the menus. Next, let's change our render sampling. Let's increase it at least. I'll set it to about 750. You can change it depending on how much time you want to spend rendering it, and that will depend on your computer and whatever specs your computer has. I'll also enable render denoising here, just to avoid any static or graininess that can decrease the quality of our final image. As well as something that I seemed to miss earlier on was coloring the base of our snow globe. So we can do that really quickly. So we can just go create a new material, and set a brown color just like that. In render view here, the color looks pretty good, I think, but there's a shadow being cast under the glass. So earlier when I was making the snow, I must have missed this, but the issue here is that there is a little bit of space between the snow and the base of the snow globe, and that casts a dark shadow. So this should be a rather quick fix. Let's align it with one of the axes, and we can see that there's clearly a lot of space. So a quick fix would be go into edit mode, alt right click to select this entire edge, and we can simply extrude it downward. Just like that. So now there would be no shadows that are being cast underneath, and there won't be that black line we saw in that render view. So let's unhide the glass from the side menu here. Alright, next thing we should fix is the lighting. As it is right now, the world is looking rather dim, so let's go over to the world properties and increase the brightness with the slider. So let's just move it up a little bit more, maybe, or around there. Something like that. Alright, that looks good. Next, what I'll do is I'll move the lighting around a little bit since it looks a little bit too close together. So I'll just point them back, like that. Let's move them away, move them up a little bit. More spotlight with this one, and more of a shadow with this one, just like that. So right before we run the render, let's just make sure our snowflakes are falling. So let's just check with the X-ray, and they're stuck on the sides. So let's press play, and then okay, that did not seem to work. So what if I set it back to 0? There we go. Pause. I think the particle system is looking good. Alright, I think let's give it a shot. Let's hit render. Let's go. So here is our final render and the end of our tutorial.
Right before I end off, I'd like to raise a little awareness about the suppression of the Uyghur people in Western China. These people are a Muslim minority that are being persecuted on ethnic and religious grounds and are also being arbitrarily detained into indoctrination camps. The mistreatment of the Uyghur people by their government is an attack on fundamental human rights and freedoms and must be stopped. In the description below, I've included a few links that go into this topic in further detail, and I encourage you to look into them further. That being said, however, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments section below, and I hope to see you all in the next one.